I'm Ilaria, I'm a PhD student at Queen Mary, where I study AI music and more specifically audio language models for music understanding.
I'm Pedro, I'm a PhD student at the Center for Digital Music, Queen Mary University of London, and I'm working on AI and music. In specific, I'm focusing on generative models for guitar tablatures.
What does AI development mean for music producers?
I think the reason why we're talking about it more and more is because the tools are becoming more accessible. I did some research on how artists were starting to integrate AI in their own practice less than 2 years ago. All the names that would come up would only be a handful of names like HollyHerndon and just other artists that are quite well established, or some that are on the other side are very, very experimental. But now we can see more and more of the amateur musicians or even people who have never made music before becoming interested in these tools because they make it so accessible.
Before, if you talk about algorithmic composition or machinic composition, everything was dictated by rules that a programmer or a developer would pre-specify in advance. Now these models basically learn patterns between a huge corpus of songs, and then they are able to somehow replicate that, and that's a bit more flexible than what we had before.
Text to media generation seems to have caught on a lot and seems to really excite people, and I do expect more and more to come out in that field. So far, for example, what we're able to do is to give text prompts to create shorter samples, where we may be able in the future to have even more control of the generation. So that basically enables people to think about music making beyond just twisting knobs or with instruments. So it just basically gives you more interfaces to interact with.
So a musician could theoretically be trained on or learn the few number of songs, scales throughout his musical career or upbringing, whereas an AI model could possibly be trained on a much larger scale of songs or corpus.
Who is using AI to create music?
Arca, as far as I know, has used an AI model that is not specified, but what she used the model for was to remix one of her songs called Ricky, I think, to make a whole album of 100 different remixes. And the idea there was to capture this ever-evolving material and to give it to people in that form. You can make infinite remixes of an original song, and each one of them will sound different, and it's unpredictable in which way it's going to differ. HollyHerndon has been one of the pioneers in using AI within her music making practice. She's always given a lot of importance to ownership and making sure that AI isn't just a way to cut costs in music making, but can enable instead new ways of making music altogether. So in a specific Holly Plus project that she presented, she essentially created this model, a timbre transfer model, that allows you to sing into an instrument and then get out her voice. I think she put it out also as a way of opening up a conversation on should artists feel comfortable with having their likeness reproduced by AI models? Should they be active in putting out in instruments and tools to do so while retaining their identity and making sure that then these projects can be traced back to the artists themselves? Yeah, she's been working with ML models or machine learning models for synthesize voice and singing voice for a long time. She's opened up the conversation for a lot of other artists to embrace too.
What are the ethical concerns?
When we start talking about copyright and ownership, there are two distinct major issues in my opinion. One has to do with the ownership of whatever an AI system generates in terms of music, but before that I think it's also very important to think about the ownership of songs or the copyrighted songs that were many times used to train these models. So in Holly's case, that's not a problem because it was her doing that with her own copyrighted material, but many models out there was trained in many copyrighted songs. The authors claim and shield themselves with fair use, and that's valid up until a point, I think. If you see this from a research perspective, there are no issues, but the issues obviously arise when you start making profit out of these models, consequently removing income from artists.
Should musicians be worried?
I also don't think that AI threatens musicians and artists because we associate a lot of values to human-made arts and works and music, and that can't disappear.
Looking at AI as a tool, I think most of the fear or these questions that we are talking about here will soon vanish. I still think humans have the final word when it comes to creativity, because at the end of the day, even these machines are trying to mimic human creativity. They're not doing machine creativity. At least what we are trying to do here is aiming for a more democratic music making community, maybe, by creating these tools that will definitely allow more people to get engaged with music, more people to create music. If nothing else, someone needs to have the intent of creating something and stir that creation. Us humans will always have the final word on it.